What's up guys, Cwesolo here, and today we are back with more coding in C#. Last time we covered how to manipulate variables and to change their values, and doing this we actually made a nice little calculator. And we did this by adding two integers together and getting an answer and then outputting to the console. We also did the same thing with doubles. I also left you guys a little challenge to make a more expansive calculator to multiply and divide as well. I'm not going to really show you how to do that. It's pretty self-explanatory. You pretty much do the same thing that you did here with just multiplying and dividing. Today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using if statements. So I'm going to be teaching you guys how to use if statements. So let's get started. First things first, an if statement is basically going to check if something is essentially true or false. It's kind of like, it's almost like a Boolean, but a little different. It's basically going to check a condition, and if the condition is met, then what is ever within the if statement is going to happen. If not, then you might have an else statement afterward. So like, if there's an else statement, then it'll do that instead of the first one. If there's an else if statement, it'll check that, and then if it's not that, it'll continue going down the chain. There's also another thing called a switch statement. I don't know if we're going to have time to cover that here, but it basically does the same thing. It goes through a series of cases, and it checks each of the cases, and it'll just output basically what's going to happen. It's basically a shortened version of an if-else statement, or if-else-if statements. But we're going to just be focusing on the if statement today. So let's get started. For our nice little if statement, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be checking whether answer here is a even number. To do this, we're going to make another integer, and we're going to call it check even. We'll go ahead and do it like that, and we're going to set it equal to answer modulus 2. So basically what this is doing is it's going to be dividing answer by 2, and then whatever the remainder is, it's going to set check even to the remainder of answer divided by 2. Now, how we're going to use this in our if statement is we're going to just simply put if check even is equal to 0. Now, if this is true, it'll do whatever is going to be written in here, right? It's going to do this. And then we're going to also put an else statement after this, just in case if it is odd. So if it is odd, it won't fire this off here, but it will do this here instead. So basically that's how it's going to work. Now there is something to note here, that if you're checking if something is equal to a certain number or value, you need to have the double equal signs. The one equal sign sets a variable to a value, or if it's a string, it'll set it to whatever you want the string to be. Same thing with like if you're using a Boolean or anything else, the first equal sign sets the variable to whatever you're setting it to. The double equal sign checks if it is equal to something. So in this case, we are checking if check even here, which is our integer value here, we're going to be checking if it is equal to 0 because we're working with remainders. If our number is not even, it is going to be 1. If it is even, it will be it'll be equal to 0 because there will be no remainders. If the number is even, it's going to divide by 2 and there's going to be just 0. There's going to be no remainder, right? So we're just checking remainders, and since we're adding numbers, it really doesn't get that complicated. So yeah, so how we're going to do this now, within your if statement, we're going to write console.writeLine, and we're going to put in here answer, whatever the number is, and then we're going to put plus. So we're concatenating, again, the string here. So even though answer is not a string, but this console.writeLine statement is outputting a string to the console. So we're concatenating this, and we are going to be putting is even with a nice exclamation point at the end, all excited. And with our else statement, we're going to do console.writeLine. We'll put answer plus, again, the quotations, is odd. Just like that. And as you can see here, this is going to run, and it's going to check whether it is even or odd. So let's do that. Let's hit F5, and let's go ahead and run our program. So for our first number, let's type in 7. Let's test 7 plus 7. Well, 14 is in fact even. So look at that. We have an even number. Now let's run it again. Let's give her another run. Let's do 2 plus 5. Oh, 2 plus 5 is 7, and 7 is in fact an odd number. So look at that. We have a functioning if-else statement here. So now, now that we've checked to see if our answer is even or odd, we can get output, a different output each time, depending on whether this statement is true or if it is not true. It's actually very useful, and you could use this in many applications, especially in game development, when you could be, for example, writing an AI for an enemy or something like that. If your player isn't seen, it's just going to randomly walk about. If player is seen, then it will go and attack the player, right? That's just a very basic outline of how powerful if statements really are, and they have a very, very wide usage. And you could be checking a lot of different things. Like you could, for example, check the length of a string, and if it meets that, you can output something based on that. Or if its string is equal to something, you can set it equal to that. Or for example, here we're checking if a number is just simply even or odd. And you could have some output based on whether or not it is odd or if it is even. If statements are very useful. Now, there is another thing here. So let's go ahead and let's change this up. I have to think of a scenario in which an else if statement can be used. Let's see here. Let's actually check now. Instead of we're gonna be checking even here. We'll go ahead and keep check even. We're gonna run another if statement. And we're gonna incorporate an else if in here. So for this if statement, we're gonna be checking if answer is less than or if it's less than or equal to 5. All right. If it is less than or equal to 5, we'll write output to the console that answer is less than 5. We're going to not make it less than or equal to, we'll just do less than 5. All right? Is less than 5. All right? Now we're going to do an else if here. So we're going to do an else if. Do else if, more parentheses. And we're going to be checking if answer is greater than or equal to 10. Actually, we'll go less than or equal to 10, just like so. And we'll go do console.writeLine, and we'll put answer with the plus again. Gonna concatenate here, and is less than or equal to 10, just like that. And then we'll have an else statement at the end here, just like so. You don't need the you don't need the parentheses here. And we'll write answer is greater than 10. Now here, what we're doing is we're using an if statement, and we're going to be checking if answer is less than 5, less than or equal than 10, or just simply greater than 10. And we can simply just run our program here as soon as this doesn't break. Visual Studio went weird on me here. All right, so let's say we'll do 1 plus 1. Well, 2 is even and 2 is less than 5. Look at that. Let's get to number 7. Let's do 5 plus 2. 7 is less than or equal than 10, so it ran this one now. So it ran our else if statement here, and now, I gotta close it out, otherwise it's gonna break. Let's do 551 plus 789. So it is even, and it is greater than 10. So look at that. So here we have functioning if and else if and else statements. If statements aren't very complicated. They're very simple, but are very powerful for checking if something is going to happen or not. And you can even use this with methods and stuff like that, which we'll get into in a later video, and how to use methods. Methods aren't next video, or next video is loops, but when we get to methods, you'll understand how we can use if statements to check if things are true or if they're false. And you could even use, for example, this less than or equal to thing in, for example, recursion, which we're probably not going to cover in this series because it is a more advanced thing to cover. But in recursion, it is important to have if statements also. Recursive methods and stuff like that. That stuff's very cool. If we, I don't know if we're going to really cover that. It's really not used in game development. So, you know, I might get to that, but I'm not counting on it. Because the series is just sort of kind of meant to be an introduction to C# and to get your feet dirty with some coding and understanding it a little bit. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to show with if statements. They're very simple. They're not really hard to wrap your head around. There are a few main components here with your if statement. We'll just break this down real quick. You're always going to start with an if. You're going to have whatever it's checking in the parentheses. No semicolon, some open curly braces, and your code in the curly braces, and then that's pretty much that. So that's how if statements work, and same thing with else. If you're going to be checking something else, yeah. If you're just checking for a specific thing, if statements are really useful. Do keep in mind, though, that if you don't have an else statement, so if you get rid of this else statement and you run another if statement, right? Do keep in mind that if we were to do check even here, and we're going to check if it's equal to 1, this is essentially doing the same thing that the other, that what the else statement was doing, but you're essentially checking a whole different new thing. Else actually covers everything that isn't this. All right? Just like how this else if statement is covering, so it's clearly not this, but it's checking everything that it's checking this now. Instead of doing if, you're doing else if, because if this is separate than this. This is a new thing. Where these are connected. This is not connected. This is connected. So if you're going to be checking multiple things that are connected, you need to use the else if statement. If you don't, you might run into some weird issues depending on what you're doing. So keep this in mind. Else if statement, these are connected. This is checking if this, then this, then this. Right? It's checking this, then it's checking to see if this is true. And if that's not true, then it's just running this. All right? It's not complicated, but it's just important to note that these two separate if statements are not connected in any kind of way. They're checking two different things, and if you were to connect an else statement to this, it would be checking something else. This else statement is connected with this if statement. It has nothing to do with this one up here. Just to keep that in mind, I am trying not to confuse you, but I'm just pointing out that it is very important to understand that that this is also something to be aware of here. These are connected. If you put an if statement under this if statement, it means nothing. It's not connected. They're two separate if statements. All right. Another thing, if you put a semicolon after your if statement, if you were to, for example, let's say, you know, if we're to do an if statement and you put a semicolon at the end of it. So if we do if, you know, check even is equal to 1, right, like that, and we just put a semicolon at the end here, it's not going to care. This will run. So it's going to run. Unfortunately, you're kind of defeating the purpose of an if statement here by putting the semicolon at the end here. Make sure you don't do that. Visual Studio isn't going to care. I don't think the compiler is going to care. In this case, it is caring because this isn't going to run now because there's an error here. But if you don't have the open curly braces and you just put a semicolon at the end here, it's not going to care. It'll check this, but it's not going to do anything about it. So you need to remember that if statements are one of those kind of things that you have to have no semicolon and curly braces. whatever statements are happening inside here are going to need a semicolon, depending on what you're doing. And this is running like a loop or something like that in there. So this is one of the scenarios in which you're not putting a semicolon at the end of your statement, right? Unlike most of the statements that we've covered so far have just been single line things, this is not one of those kind of things. So yeah, I figured I would let you know of that. Just, you can put semicolons, oops. You can put semicolons at the end of them, but you can't, it's not going to mean anything. So, yeah, I figured I'd mention that. If you guys liked the video or have anything to say or have any questions about what we covered today, I'm not going to leave you guys with any challenges today, unfortunately. I think if statements are such not a hard concept to grasp that I don't really think it's worth doing a challenge over. If you'd like to actually have some sort of challenge, implement this into your calculator somehow, checking if things are odd or even, or if a specific thing is equal to a certain value, and have some code to note of that. Yeah, so if you guys like the video, leave a like, comment if you have anything to say, any questions or anything like that. I'll get back as soon as I can. And yeah, I think that's it. Subscribe if you're enjoying the content I'm creating, if you'd like to see more. And I'll see you guys in the next video.